Welcome, my name is James Bryan, author and founder of Easy Online Divorce, and today I'm going to talk about how to choose the right grounds for your divorce. So what are grounds for divorce? The person who's applying for a divorce is known as the petitioner or the applicant, and their spouse who receives the divorce papers is known as the respondent. So if the petitioner can convince the courts that the marriage has broken down, the courts will then give them permission to divorce. To prove that the marriage is broken down, the petitioner has got to use one of 5 facts, more commonly known as grounds, for the divorce: adultery, unreasonable behaviour, desertion, 2 years separation with consent, and 5 years separation without consent. This video is going to provide an overview of the 5 grounds for divorce, and then we're going to have other videos with more detailed explanations of each ground and how to use them in your situation. So you've probably seen the latest news story about Nick Hancock and his affair with his aide. Now most people think that adultery is having an affair, but in actual fact, adultery in the eyes of the law is sexual intercourse between a married man or woman with somebody of the opposite sex. And furthermore, to use adultery, you can't continue to live with your spouse for more than 6 months after knowing that you found out about it. So adultery is your spouse having sexual intercourse with someone of the opposite sex, and you can't continue to live with them. That's what adultery is. So other things such as texting, affairs, kissing, all of those kind of things is not actually adultery. And so if you use adultery as your grounds for divorce, and then your spouse defends against that and changes their mind, even if they said that they would agree to it, you would then have to prove that adultery took place, which can be quite difficult, bearing in mind that adultery is only sexual intercourse. So the second reason for divorce is unreasonable behaviour, and this is the one that's used the most. Almost half of all women applying for divorce use unreasonable behaviour, and about a third men. And I think one of the reasons why it's so popular is because this is the one that can get you divorced the most quickly. You don't have to wait for 2 years. And in terms of using unreasonable behaviour, it can be severe allegations, or it can be quite mild. The court doesn't look at the severity of it and decide whether or not to give you permission for the divorce. But what they are looking for is that the marriage is broken down. So it can be usual things and patterns that people go through when a marriage breaks down, in terms of communicating with each other, lack of intimacy, kind of living separate lives. They're all valid reasons that in terms of the breakdown of the marriage. Now the important thing with using unreasonable behaviour is that it has to be the behaviour of your spouse. It can't be your behaviour. The next one's desertion. Now this is hardly ever used. On average there's around about 90 to 100,000 divorces every year in England and Wales, and of that less than 400 a desertion. And the reason being is it's quite difficult to prove that it's actually took place, because you have to prove that the person who's deserted you has deliberately deserted you, and of course if you don't know where they are and you can't get in touch with them, then that's quite hard to prove. 2 years separation with consent is the second most commonly used reason after unreasonable behaviour. And so 2 years separation, that means that the both of you have lived separately for 2 years, and whilst it can be physically living apart, there's an understanding, particularly at the moment with the fact that people have been stuck together in lockdown, that you can still live separately while in under the same roof. But it is a bit of a grey area, and so if you were living together for 18 months as an example, under the same roof but living separately, and then you finally moved out for 6 months, you could find that the court comes back to you and asks for evidence that you actually lived separately. So that's something to look out for, and we'll go into more detail on the separation video. The other thing is that your spouse must agree to it. So what happens is when you file for divorce and you use 2 years separation, they'll receive the papers, and on that it'll say, you want a divorce and you're using 2 year separation. Do you agree to that? Do you consent with that? And if they don't agree to it, then your application stops right there. So if you've got a situation where you think that your spouse might not agree to it, or they might change your mind, you shouldn't use 2 years separation with consent. There's other ways of doing it. And finally, we've got 5 years separation without consent. And so whereas with the 2 years, you need your spouse's permission and agreement for the divorce to go through, here you don't. But that doesn't mean it's automatic. You still got to go through exactly the same process. Your spouse still receives the divorce papers. It says that you want a divorce on 5 years separation. The difference is that they can't say no to that, but they can ignore the petition, which will delay and cause problems. So it's not without its challenges in certain situations. So why is choosing the right grounds for divorce important? Well, the main reason is to avoid delays and or even stopping the divorce altogether. So as I mentioned, if you're using adultery, relying on adultery is the reason for your divorce, but then you're reporting it and you continue to live together for more than 6 months, the court will throw it out. They won't let it go through. And similarly, if you use 2 years separation and your spouse decides, no, I don't agree with it, then that application will be stopped. So that doesn't mean that if you fall into those categories that's it, you can't get a divorce. There is ways around it. And so if you are in that situation, or if you've got any questions in general that you want to talk through in terms of your specific situation, please give us a call, 0204 530 8101, or you can drop us an email, contact@easyonlinedivorce.co.uk. You can ask us some questions, you can schedule a call back. Also, you can put some comments underneath this YouTube video. We'll respond to those as well. And please subscribe to the channel. If you subscribe, you'll get an update when the next videos are launched. The next videos that we're going to put out are going to be the specific videos on adultery, on unreasonable behaviour, and on 2 years and 5 years separation. We're going to talk through the pros and cons of each, how to use them, and more importantly, when not to use them. So subscribe to the channel, and thank you so much for watching. And remember, divorce isn't the end of your life, it's the start of a new life.